The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm orange glow across the jungle. The thick trees towered over the narrow path that Zane was walking along. He had been on this planet for 3 weeks now, studying its unique ecosystem, and every day was a new discovery. The air smelled of damp earth and fresh leaves, but today something felt different. The usual sounds of the jungle, chirping birds, buzzing insects, and rustling leaves, were quieter than usual, as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. Zane wiped the sweat from his brow and checked his wrist device. The GPS showed that he was nearing a dense part of the jungle that was still unexplored. He had read about strange creatures in the area, but nothing had prepared him for what he would find. As he carefully moved forward, the bushes ahead parted, and he froze. Something small and strange was lying on the ground. It was glowing faintly, its fur a soft, luminous blue. Zane bent down cautiously, his curiosity growing. It was a creature unlike any he had ever seen before. Its tiny, round body was covered in fur, and its face, though animal-like, had an almost human expression. The creature stirred slightly, and Zane reached out to check if it was alive. The cub's eyes fluttered open, revealing a golden glow that seemed to pulse with its heartbeat. It hissed weakly and tried to move, but its tiny limbs seemed too weak to support it. Zane's heart softened. He knew the dangers of this jungle, but something about the cub made him want to help. "Hey, little one," Zane muttered softly, glancing around for any sign of danger. "I'm not going to hurt you." He gently scooped the cub into his arms, cradling it as if it were a fragile piece of glass. It felt warm against his chest, and despite its earlier hiss, the creature seemed to calm down. Zane could see the cuts and bruises on its tiny body. It must have been attacked by something larger, but there was no sign of its mother. Without hesitation, Zane pulled out his medical kit and began to tend to its wounds. Minutes passed, and Zane's hands worked quickly and efficiently. He applied a salve to the creature's injuries and wrapped it in a light cloth. As he did, he noticed a rustling sound behind him. The jungle had gone eerily silent again. Zane's senses tingled with unease, but before he could turn around, a deep growl echoed through the air. His heart skipped a beat. He knew that sound all too well. A predator was nearby. He turned slowly, and there, emerging from the trees, was something far bigger than anything he could have imagined. The tigress was massive, its fur shimmering in the dappled sunlight. Her golden eyes locked onto Zane, and in an instant Zane knew she was the cub's mother. The tigress was beautiful, but there was no mistaking the fierce protectiveness in her gaze. Zane froze, holding the cub close to his chest. The tigress took a step forward, her large paws making barely a sound as they touched the ground. She was circling him now, her eyes never leaving him. Zane's mind raced. He had read about creatures like this, predators who would defend their young to the death. He had no weapon, no way to protect himself. The jungle had no rules, no mercy. "Easy, easy," Zane whispered, trying to stay calm. He couldn't make any sudden moves. The tigress could attack at any moment. The tigress growled again, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through Zane's chest. He could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. Zane's heart pounded in his ears. He was a scientist, not a soldier. He wasn't trained for this kind of situation. His survival skills were limited to making sure he didn't get lost, or hungry, not facing down a giant predator. But then something surprising happened. The tigress stopped. She tilted her head, her gaze softening slightly as she looked at the cub in Zane's arms. Zane's breath caught in his throat. The tigress sniffed the air, and then slowly, she took another step forward, but it wasn't in aggression. It was as though she were curious, studying him just as much as he was studying her. Zane didn't dare move. He had no idea what to do, but he couldn't let go of the cub. Not now. He glanced down at the little creature, who was still breathing, weakly but seemed to be calming in his arms. Then just as quickly as the tension had risen, the tigress lowered her massive head toward him, nudging the cub with her nose. Zane exhaled, feeling a mix of relief and confusion. Was the tigress accepting him? The tigress growled again, But this time it was a gentler sound. She stepped closer, sniffing Zane's face, and Zane could feel her hot breath on his skin. For a moment he thought she might lash out, but instead she stepped back. The tigress lowered her head, as though giving him permission to care for the cub. Zane blinked in disbelief. Could it be that the tigress recognized he had helped her cub? Or was this some strange test to see if he was worthy of being near her, young? He stayed perfectly still holding the cub, waiting to see what the tigress would do next. Time seemed to stretch on forever. The tigress stared at him for what felt like an eternity, her golden eyes searching his face. Finally, after what felt like the longest pause of Zane's life, the tigress took a step back. She looked at the cub one more time, then turned and slowly walked into the dense jungle. Zane's heart was still racing, but he couldn't help the sense of awe that washed over him. He had just survived an encounter with one of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy, and in that moment he realized something. He had just become part of this alien world. As Zane carefully stood up, cradling the cub in his arms, he couldn't shake the feeling that the tigress had made a decision. He wasn't just a stranger in her jungle anymore. He had been accepted into her world. But for how long? Zane moved cautiously through the jungle, the cub still cradled in his arms. His eyes darted from side to side, scanning for any signs of danger. The tigress, who had initially seemed so threatening, was now gone, but Zane wasn't ready to assume he was out of danger. He knew how unpredictable these creatures could be. The cub stirred slightly in his arms, and Zane glanced down. The creature's tiny body was still weak, but it was no longer trembling with fear. Zane smiled softly, feeling a strange sense of attachment. He had seen countless alien species on his travels, but nothing like this. There was something special about this cub, and for some reason, Zane felt responsible for it. The jungle around him was alive with sounds once more, chirping insects, distant animal calls, and the rustling of leaves. But none of the sounds seemed to come too close. It was as if the jungle itself had fallen into a quiet respect for the cub he carried. Zane made his way deeper into the jungle, following a path he had mapped earlier on his GPS. He knew the jungle well enough by now, having spent several weeks exploring its depths. But today felt different. It felt like the jungle was watching him, as if it was aware of the connection he had formed with the cub. He found a small clearing near a stream and decided to stop and rest. The cub, now resting in his lap, made a soft purring sound, and Zane couldn't help but smile. The purring was faint, almost inaudible, but Zane could feel the vibration against his legs. It was a sign that the cub was recovering, and that brought Zane a sense of relief. "I wonder if your mother is still nearby," Zane murmured, his eyes scanning the tree line. He hadn't seen the tigress for a while now, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching him from the shadows. The cub's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, and it looked up at him with those glowing golden eyes. Zane stroked its head gently, careful not to hurt it. "Don't worry, little one," Zane said softly. "I'll keep you safe until your mother returns. You can count on me." As the day went on, Zane kept the cub close, making sure it stayed warm and comfortable. The sun began to set, and the jungle transformed before his eyes. The vibrant green leaves faded into deep shades of purple and blue, the stars beginning to twinkle overhead. Zane set up a small campfire by the stream, the crackling of the flames providing a comforting sound in the quiet of the night. But despite the peaceful atmosphere, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. He kept his eyes on the surrounding trees, watching for any signs of movement. He had seen how quickly the tigress had appeared before, and he knew she could be close by, waiting for the right moment to make her presence known. The cub let out a soft mew, and Zane looked down at it. "What do you think?" he asked, though he knew the cub couldn't answer. "Do you think she'll come back for you?" The cub didn't respond with words, of course, but it crawled a little closer to him, nuzzling against his chest. Zane couldn't help but smile. It seemed the cub had begun to trust him, just as much as he had begun to trust it. Suddenly, A rustle from the trees caught Zane's attention. His heart skipped a beat, and he instinctively reached for his survival knife, the only weapon he had on him. The sounds were soft, almost like a whisper through the leaves, but Zane knew something, or someone, was approaching. The cub tensed in his lap, its ears standing upright, and Zane could feel the tension in its small body. The jungle grew even, quieter as the sound of footsteps grew louder. Then, as if out of nowhere, the tigress appeared from the shadows. Her golden eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, and Zane froze. The tigress wasn't alone. She had brought something with her, another cub, smaller and more fragile than the one Zane had saved. Zane's breath caught in his throat. The tigress had returned, and she had brought a second cub, one that seemed to be just as injured as the first. The days passed slowly in the jungle, and Zane began to settle into an uneasy routine. He spent most of his time caring for the two cubs, making sure they were safe and well fed. The tigress, though fierce and intimidating, never left their side. She was always near, watching them with her glowing golden eyes, silently ensuring that nothing happened to her young. Zane had learned a lot about the tigress in the days that followed. She wasn't just a predator, she was protective, intelligent, and capable of forming connections. He had come to realize that in her own way she trusted him. Her behavior wasn't driven by simple territorial instinct. There was something deeper at play. But the jungle was not a peaceful place, and Zane couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. The sense of unease that had settled in his chest didn't leave. There were moments when he could hear strange, distant noises, growls that didn't belong to the tigress or any of the creatures he had encountered before. It was almost as if something was stalking them. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, Zane sat by the small fire he had built, watching the cubs play nearby. The tigress was pacing at the edge of the clearing, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows of the trees. Zane had learned to be silent in these moments, respecting the tigress's vigilance. He knew she was always alert to danger. Suddenly, the cubs froze. They stopped playing and looked toward the jungle's edge with wide eyes. Zane felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He glanced at the tigress, who had also tensed. She made a low growl deep in her chest, a sound that rumbled through the air like distant thunder. Zane's heart raced. He stood up, his hand instinctively moving to his survival knife. There was no time to think. Whatever was out there was getting closer. The jungle had grown silent again, and Zane could hear the rustling of leaves, followed by a snap of a twig. It wasn't the gentle noise of the wind. It was the unmistakable sound of something large moving through the underbrush. Then it came into view. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike any Zane had seen before. It was massive, with dark, scaled skin that shimmered under the dim light. Its eyes were a deep red, glowing like embers in the darkness. Its long, muscular body slithered silently over the ground, and it had the terrifying, predatory grace of a hunting animal. Zane's breath caught in his throat. This creature was nothing like the peaceful wildlife he had studied. It was a predator, and it had come for the cubs. The tigress let out a roar, one that echoed through the jungle and rattled the leaves in the trees. Her massive frame charged toward the creature without hesitation, her claws extended, ready to defend her young at any cost. Zane felt a surge of adrenaline. The tigress was strong, but this creature was unlike anything he had ever seen. Zane moved quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. He grabbed the cubs, holding them tightly to his chest, and sprinted toward the opposite side of the clearing, away from the battle. He didn't know if he could outrun whatever this creature was, but he had to try. The tigress and the creature clashed in the center of the clearing with a deafening crash. Zane could hear the savage growls and the sound of claws raking against scales. The tigress was fighting fiercely, but the creature was just as relentless, its enormous jaws snapping at her as they grappled in the dirt. Zane glanced back, his eyes wide with fear. The tigress was holding her own, but she was clearly struggling. The creature was too strong, too large. Zane could hear her growling, but there was a sharp edge of pain in her voice now. "Please," Zane whispered under his breath. "Please, don't let anything happen to her." As if answering his silent prayer, the tigress let out another mighty roar, her body lurching forward with a sudden burst of strength. With one powerful swipe, she struck the creature across its face, sending it tumbling backward. It staggered, momentarily stunned, and the tigress didn't hesitate. She pounced, sinking her claws deep into the creature's flesh. Zane's heart skipped a beat. The tigress was winning, but the battle wasn't over. The creature wasn't going to back down that easily. Zane turned back to the cubs, holding them, close to his chest. The little creatures were trembling, their tiny bodies vibrating with fear. He whispered soothing words to them, hoping to calm them as the battle raged on. In the distance, he could hear the sound of more creatures moving through the jungle, their footsteps heavy and determined. They weren't alone. This creature wasn't the only one hunting the cubs. Zane's mind raced. They had to leave. Now. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his fear under control. The tigress had given him a chance to escape, but he couldn't leave her behind. She had trusted him, and he couldn't abandon her now. Zane scanned the jungle looking for an escape route. There was a narrow trail leading up a hill, hidden behind thick vines. If they could make it there, they might have a chance. The tigress had given them this one opportunity, and Zane wasn't about to waste it. "Hold on, little ones," Zane whispered as he began to move toward the hill. "We have to go." The cubs squirmed in his arms, clearly frightened, but they didn't resist. Zane's legs burned with the effort of running uphill, but he kept his eyes fixed on the path ahead. The jungle was alive with danger, and he had no idea how long they could outrun it. He glanced over his shoulder just in time to see the tigress fling the creature aside. She was bloodied, but she wasn't done yet. She let out another ferocious growl, her eyes blazing with fury. Zane had to make it up the hill. He had to find safety for the cubs. The tigress had done her part. Now, it was his turn. Zane's legs burned as he pushed himself harder, climbing the narrow trail that led up the hill. His breath was shallow, his chest heaving with each step. The cubs were still in his arms, their tiny bodies trembling with fear. Zane could feel their distress, but he had no time to comfort them. The jungle was alive with sounds of creatures closing in. Something was coming, something worse than the beast the tigress had just fought. He glanced back once more, but the clearing below was now a blur of shadows. He could still hear the growls, but there was no sign of the tigress. Zane's heart sank. He had to trust her. She was strong, but she couldn't fight forever. He had to get the cubs to safety or they'd all be lost. The trail wound its way through the dense jungle, the trees leaning in as if trying to suffocate him. The air felt heavy, thick with moisture and the scent of earth. Zane's mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, but one kept repeating in his head. Where was the tigress? The sounds from below had started to fade, and Zane hoped that meant she had won the battle. But there was a gnawing feeling in the pit of his stomach. He didn't want to abandon her. The tigress had saved him, and now he was running, leaving her behind. He couldn't shake the guilt that tugged at him. He finally reached the top of the hill and stopped to catch his breath. The view from here was breathtaking. The jungle stretched out below, a vast sea of green, while the sky above had started to darken with the approach of night. Zane set the cubs down on the ground, watching them huddle together for comfort. They were still too small and too weak to fend for themselves, but they were strong in their own way, brave even in the face of danger. "Stay here," Zane whispered to them, his voice soft and reassuring. He glanced around, looking for a safe spot, a place where he could protect them. The trail behind him was quiet now, but Zane didn't trust it. He knew danger could appear at any moment. Suddenly, a familiar growl echoed through the trees. Zane's heart leapt into his throat. The tigress had arrived. He turned to see her emerging from the shadows, her massive body silhouetted against the fading light. Her golden eyes gleamed with a fierce determination as she stepped into the clearing. She was covered in dirt and blood, her fur matted from the battle, but there was no mistaking the power she exuded. Zane felt a rush of relief flood through him, but it was quickly replaced by confusion. The tigress didn't stop at the top of the hill. Instead, she walked toward him with steady, purposeful steps, her gaze fixed on the cubs. Zane's breath caught in his chest. She was not just looking at the cubs, she was looking at him. The tigress stopped in front of him, her massive frame towering over him. She lowered her head, her golden eyes fixed on his face. Zane felt a chill run down his spine, but he didn't move. There was no fear in him now, only a deep understanding of what was happening. The tigress let out a low, rumbling growl, not one of aggression, but one of acknowledgement. Zane could feel the weight of her gaze, and for the first time he understood what it meant. She was claiming him. In the wild, claims were not made with words, but with actions. The tigress had seen something in Zane, something worthy of her trust, her protection, and now, her bond. Zane realized with a deep sense of awe that he was no longer just an outsider in this jungle. He had become part of it, part of her world. For a long moment they stood there, locked in a silent exchange. Zane didn't need to speak. He had saved her cub, and she had protected him. Their bond was unspoken, but it was stronger than any words could convey. Zane could feel the tigress's power, her strength, and the weight of her claim on him. Finally, the tigress turned her gaze to the cubs, who had been watching quietly from a distance. She let out a soft, almost gentle growl, and the cubs, slowly, crawled toward her. The tigress nudged them gently with her. Zane sat quietly beside the tigress, his eyes scanning the jungle as the last rays of sunlight faded behind the hills. The night had fallen completely, and the stars now twinkled above like a blanket of diamonds. He could hear the sounds of the jungle around him, soft rustlings, distant animal calls, and the occasional splash of water from the stream below. It was peaceful, yet Zane felt an unsettling sense of anticipation deep in his chest. The jungle had always felt unpredictable, but now it felt like something was stirring, a new threat, one that would test everything he had come to care about. The tigress lay nearby, her massive form resting but still alert. She had not let her guard down, not even for a moment. Her golden eyes were always watching, always searching. Zane knew that the jungle's calm was an illusion. The peace was temporary. The cubs had fallen asleep by the tigress's side, curled up together in the protective warmth of their mother. Zane could see how they had started to grow, their tiny bodies stronger, their movements more confident. The cubs had become part of his world just as much as the tigress had, and he had promised to protect them. But now that promise was being tested in ways he hadn't expected. Zane had come to the jungle as a scientist, a man of logic and reason, but he had become something else in the weeks since. He had become a protector, a member of this alien family, and with that came a responsibility far greater than he could have imagined. The tigress let out a soft growl, pulling Zane from his thoughts. She was looking at him, her gaze steady and unwavering. Zane felt a sudden tightness in his chest. There was something different about the way she looked at him now, something that spoke of more than just trust. Zane understood. The time had come for him to make a choice. The jungle had grown silent, and Zane felt the weight of the decision before him. The tigress had claimed him, accepted him into her family, and now he had to choose whether to stay or leave. He could return to his life, to the world he knew, but that would mean leaving the tigress and the cubs behind. It would mean abandoning everything he had grown to care for in a world that was so different from his own. But could he leave them? Could he walk away from the bond they shared? Zane stood up slowly, walking to the edge of the clearing. The cool night air brushed against his skin, and he closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the jungle wash over him. He had always been a man of action, but now he was paralyzed by uncertainty. The tigress and her cubs were his family, now, but his own world was so far away. Could he truly leave that life behind? The decision wasn't just about staying or leaving. It was about what kind of man he wanted to be. He had come to this planet to study its ecosystems, to learn from its alien life forms, but in the end, he had become part of the ecosystem himself. The tigress had chosen him, the cubs had accepted him, and now, the jungle had become his home. A movement in the shadows caught Zane's attention. His heart skipped a beat as he turned, to see a dark figure emerge from the trees. His instincts kicked in and he reached for his survival knife, But before he could act, the tigress was already on her feet, her body tensed, ready to protect. The figure stepped into the clearing, and Zane's breath caught. It was another creature, one he had never seen before. It was tall, with long, sinewy limbs and glowing green eyes that glimmered in the dark. Its skin was smooth and pale, and it carried a strange, unfamiliar weapon. Zane could feel the tension in the air, the weight of danger pressing down on him. The tigress growled, her body low to the ground, ready to strike. Zane stayed still, his heart racing, waiting for the creature's next move. But instead of attacking, the creature spoke. "You are not alone," it said in a voice that was almost melodic, yet cold and distant. "The jungle has accepted you, but your presence here does not go unnoticed." Zane's eyes narrowed, his hand still on his knife. "Who are you?" The creature tilted its head, studying Zane with an unreadable expression. "I am a guardian of this world," it replied. "And I am here to warn you. The jungle is under threat. Forces are coming, ones that will not hesitate to destroy everything you have come to love." Zane felt his stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "The balance of this world is fragile," the guardian explained. "You, human, are an outsider. Your presence disturbs that balance. The creatures here may accept you for now, but soon they will see you as a threat. The forces that are coming will see you as an obstacle to their power." Zane's mind raced. He had thought that he had found peace here, that he had found a place where he belonged. But now, it seemed that peace was only temporary. The guardian's words echoed in his mind. "Forces are coming." The tigress growled again, stepping closer to Zane, her eyes locked on the guardian. Zane's thoughts were in chaos, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let these creatures harm the tigress or the cubs. They had become his family, and he would do anything to protect them. "I won't let them take this place," Zane said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. "I won't let them take my family." The guardian studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then you must choose, human. Fight for this world or leave it behind. There is no middle ground." Zane looked at the tigress, who was watching him with her golden eyes. The cubs were huddled close, unaware of the danger looming around them. Zane felt a surge of determination. He had made his choice. "I choose to stay," Zane said, his voice firm. "I will fight to protect them. I will protect this world." The guardian gave a slight bow as though acknowledging his decision. "Then you are ready. The battle is coming. Prepare yourself." Zane nodded, his heart still heavy with the weight of his choice. But there was no turning back now. He had made his decision, and he would stand by it. He was part of this world now, and he would fight to protect the tigress, the cubs, and everything he had come to love. The jungle had fallen eerily quiet. The air felt thick, heavy with anticipation. Zane stood in the clearing, the tigress by his side, her golden eyes locked on the distant shadows. The cubs had moved closer to her, their small bodies huddled together for warmth and comfort. Zane could feel the weight of their trust on his shoulders. He had made his choice. There was no turning back now. The guardian's warning echoed in his mind. The battle is coming. Zane wasn't sure what that battle would look like, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. He had faced danger before, but this felt different. This wasn't just about survival. This was about protecting a world he had come to love and a family he had never expected. The tigress let out a low growl, her body tensing. Zane could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Something was coming, something big. He reached for his survival knife, his fingers tightening around the handle. It wasn't much against whatever forces were out there, but it was all he had. Suddenly, the jungle erupted in noise. The ground beneath Zane's feet trembled, and the trees shook as if something massive was moving through them. The air was filled with the sound of heavy footsteps, the kind that made the earth itself groan under the weight. Zane's heart raced. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew it was close. Then, through the trees, they appeared. A group of alien soldiers, their bodies covered in dark, armor-like plates, marched forward with terrifying precision. Their weapons gleamed in the dim light, and their faces were obscured by helmets, but The cold, ruthless energy they radiated was unmistakable. They were here to conquer, to destroy, and Zane knew they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. The tigress stepped forward, her muscles rippling beneath her fur, ready to fight. Zane felt a surge of adrenaline rush through him. The soldiers were too many, but he couldn't stand by and do nothing. The tigress needed him, just as much as the cubs did. This was his fight now. The lead soldier raised his weapon, aiming directly at the tigress. Zane's heart stopped for a moment, but before he could react, the tigress launched herself forward with a mighty roar, her claws outstretched. The soldier fired, but the tigress was too fast. She collided with him, knocking him to the ground, and the soldier's weapon went flying. The other soldiers hesitated for a moment, stunned by the ferocity of the attack, but it was enough time for Zane to spring into action. He charged toward the nearest soldier, his knife raised. The soldier turned, surprised by the human's courage, but Zane didn't hesitate. He thrust the knife into the soldier's side, feeling the resistance of the armor as the blade sliced through. The soldier let out a hiss of pain, stumbling backward, but Zane didn't stop. He swung the knife again, slashing at the soldier's exposed neck. The soldier collapsed to the ground, and Zane quickly turned to face the next one. Battle was chaotic, the sounds of growling and shouting filling the air. The tigress fought with a grace and power Zane had never seen before, her claws tearing through armor as if it were paper. But for every soldier she took down, 2 more seemed to appear. They were relentless, moving in perfect sync, and Zane realized just how outnumbered they were. The cubs were still huddled together, their eyes wide with fear. Zane couldn't afford to let anything happen to them. He needed to protect them, to make sure they stayed safe while the tigress kept the soldiers occupied. He glanced at the tigress, who was now surrounded by 3 soldiers. She was wounded, her fur matted with blood, but her eyes were fierce,